Have you ever felt something shift in your spirit the moment someone walked into the room, but you couldn't explain why? That quiet discomfort, that subtle tension in your chest. It wasn't just nerves, it wasn't paranoia. It was something deeper. It was your soul recognizing a threat before your mind could catch up. And still you silenced it. You told yourself to stop overthinking, to be kind, to give them a chance. You ignored what you knew in your gut, because your heart was too open, too hopeful, too trusting. And that's where it all began. You weren't naive. You were just real. You believed in people because that's who you are. You see potential. You see light. You want to believe that people mean what they say, that love is honest, that loyalty is mutual. But not everyone thinks like you. Some people see your kindness and take it as weakness. They take your silence as permission. They smile in your face while they slowly drain your energy, your peace, your joy. And you keep giving. You keep forgiving. You keep hoping they'll change. But deep down, something always felt off. That feeling you pushed aside, that whisper in your soul, it mattered. It was never a mistake. It was God's early warning system. It was truth dressed in discomfort. But you weren't ready to hear it yet. You were still hoping to be wrong. You were still trying to protect something that was already breaking. And when you finally saw what they were hiding, when their mask slipped, it didn't just hurt, it shattered you. Because it wasn't just about what they did. It was about how long you defended them while they did it. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. That moment of awakening, as painful as it was, is the beginning of your freedom. God didn't let you see their fakeness to destroy you. He showed you so you could escape. He showed you so you'd stop settling, so you'd stop shrinking. So you'd finally see that your heart deserves real love, real loyalty, real presence, not performance, not manipulation, not conditional affection dressed up as concern. You're not crazy for feeling what you felt. You're not broken because it all fell apart. In fact, this is where everything begins. This is where you get your power back. Because now you know. Now you see. And once God opens your eyes, He doesn't close them again. The pain may still echo, but clarity is your reward. And it will guide you to better, to real, to peace. Stay with this. Don't look away. Because what you're feeling right now is transformation. This is the moment you rise. And by the time this message ends, you won't be the same. You'll remember who you are. You'll remember what you deserve. And you'll never again ignore that whisper that tried to protect you from the very beginning. You kept showing up for people who would have left you the moment it wasn't convenient. You bent until it hurt. You stayed quiet to keep the peace, even when your silence cost you pieces of yourself. You forgave things you should have walked away from, and you stayed loyal to people who were only loyal to their own needs. Not because you were weak, but because you were strong in a way most people will never understand. You believed in the good. You believed in second chances. You believed that love could change things. But there's a danger in giving your heart to someone who never intended to protect it. Loyalty is a beautiful thing until it chains you to something that's slowly breaking you. You kept holding on, hoping the weight would lift, but it only got heavier. You weren't loving them. You were carrying them. You thought you were healing them, but you were only hiding their damage from yourself. And that's what loyalty does when it's given without boundaries. It blinds you. It convinces you to fight battles that were never yours. It convinces you that the more you endure, the more you're proving your worth. But love doesn't demand suffering. It doesn't silence you. It doesn't drain you until there's nothing left to give. You weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. You were hoping they'd wake up and see what they had in you. But some people don't recognize light because they've lived too long in darkness. And it's not your job to fix that. It's not your job to teach someone how to love you while they're busy pretending they already know how. You're not responsible for someone else's lack of emotional maturity. You're not a rehabilitation center for broken intentions. The truth is, the more you tried to prove your love, the more they proved they didn't deserve it. And that disconnect, that ache in your chest every time you tried to explain your worth to someone who refused to listen, that was the sign. You weren't being heard because they were never listening. You weren't being seen because they were only ever looking at what you could offer. You kept showing up whole for people who only gave you fragments. And every time you stayed, you taught them it was okay to keep giving you less. But now you're seeing clearly. Now you know that real love doesn't have to be earned with suffering. It doesn't require you to sacrifice your voice just to keep someone close. Real love honors, respects, protects. And when you realize how far you went for people who wouldn't even meet you halfway, you stop chasing and you start healing. You stop explaining and you start reclaiming. This is where the shift happens. This is where you stop bleeding for people who only ever watched you break. And once you make that decision, You don't go back, you rise, you remember, you rebuild. You prayed for answers, you cried for clarity, you begged God to show you the truth, because somewhere deep inside you already knew it. You weren't asking for a miracle, you were asking for confirmation. But nothing came, no lightning, no voice from the clouds. Just silence, and that silence felt like abandonment, like your heart was breaking while heaven watched. But what you didn't see in that moment was that God wasn't ignoring you. He was preparing the perfect moment to show you exactly what you needed to see, without the confusion, without the second guessing, without the doubt. Sometimes the silence is divine. It's not punishment, it's protection. Because if God gave you the answer too soon, you would have gone right back. You would have forgiven too fast. You would have missed what needed to be revealed. So he waited, not because he wanted you to suffer, but because he wanted you to see clearly, not through fear, not through hope, but through truth. Because when the truth hits at the right time, it doesn't just open your eyes, it opens your life. There's a reason people can pretend for a season but not forever. Eventually, what's fake starts to crack under the weight of your authenticity. What's hidden starts to leak through their smiles, their words, their actions. And that's when God moves. That's when he lifts the curtain and lets you witness what was really happening behind it all. Not to shame them, not to destroy you, but to set you free. Because when God reveals, he also releases. He doesn't just show you the problem, he gives you the power to walk away from it. And when that moment comes, it's not chaos, it's clarity. The conversations you thought were real suddenly sound rehearsed. The kindness feels mechanical. The connection feels hollow. You're not imagining it, you're awakening. You're seeing the gap between what you felt and what they gave. And in that space, something powerful is born. Discernment. The ability to see through the words and into the heart. The strength to stop clinging to what only ever made you question your worth. God's timing is never off. When he lets the mask fall, he's not being cruel, he's being kind, because now you don't have to guess. You don't have to overthink every message, every silence, every shift in energy. Now you see, and what you see can't be unseen. That's not a curse. That's your confirmation. That's the answer you prayed for, wrapped in heartbreak, delivered in truth. So let it break, let it fall. Because what's crumbling wasn't built on love, it was built on illusion. And you don't need illusions anymore. You need peace. You need real. You need God's version of love, not the world's imitation of it. And now that you see the truth, you'll never walk blind again. Now that you've felt the silence and survived it, you'll never confuse it with absence again. This is where clarity becomes your compass. This is where everything starts to change. The truth always finds its way to the surface. It doesn't matter how carefully someone crafts their image, how perfectly they perform, or how convincingly they wear the mask. Eventually, pressure exposes what pretense cannot hold, and when it does, the illusion dissolves. The words stop sounding sincere. The behavior starts slipping. Their energy changes. And suddenly, you're not questioning yourself anymore. You're watching the truth unfold right in front of you. It's uncomfortable. It's heartbreaking, but it's necessary. Because the longer the mask stays on, the longer you stay stuck in a lie disguised as love. God allows the mask to fall, not to humiliate you, but to heal you. Not to leave you shattered, but to finally show you why you always felt so drained around them. Why your joy shrank the longer you stayed. Why your peace was always on edge, walking on emotional eggshells. It wasn't you, it was the misalignment. It was the performance you kept applauding, hoping it would one day become real. But fake doesn't become real just because you love it enough. And pretending isn't connection, it's control. You weren't seen, you were managed, you weren't loved, you were tolerated. And that's not your fault. That's their limitation. When someone's true self starts slipping through the cracks, that's not the moment to panic. That's the moment to pause and pay attention. Because God doesn't just reveal things to hurt you. He reveals to release you. He allows the mask to fall so you can finally stop making excuses for someone who was never truly showing up for you in the first place. The pain of that realization cuts deep. But behind that pain is your permission to walk away, to breathe, to begin again. Don't beg people to be real. Don't plead with someone to give you what should have been free from the start. Honesty, presence, respect. If you have to fight for the basics, you're not in love, you're in survival. And you weren't made to live in survival mode. You were made to grow. You were made to thrive. But you can't thrive in a place where you're constantly questioning your value, trying to earn approval, trying to prove your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. This is your wake-up call. This is the moment where your spirit finally recognizes its own strength. Not because the pain stopped, but because you started seeing it as a message, not a punishment. You're not broken. You're breaking free. You're not being abandoned. You're being redirected. And what feels like loss is actually light, burning through every lie, every illusion, every false attachment you held onto out of fear. Let the mask fall. Let the truth stand, because once you've seen what's real, your soul won't settle for counterfeit again. Not in love, not in friendship, not in anything. From here forward, it's all real or nothing, because now you know, and knowing is the beginning of becoming. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 96A5 ACD 92 EBBFBF SJC. It wasn't your fault that you didn't see it sooner. When your heart is pure, it doesn't expect deception. When your intentions are real, you assume others mean what they say. That's why betrayal hits so hard. Because it doesn't just break your trust, it breaks the image you had of someone you once believed in. But even in that heartbreak, something sacred is happening. God isn't punishing you. He's pulling you out of the confusion, out of the false comfort, out of the place where you were slowly losing yourself just to keep someone else close. The truth may sting, but it saves you. It might come wrapped in tears, disappointment, and silence, but it's still a gift. Because betrayal is not the end of your story. It's the moment the story changes. It's the turning point where pain becomes clarity, and clarity becomes power. You thought the ending would come through reconciliation, but instead, it came through exposure. Not because you didn't try hard enough, but because God loves you too much to let you keep holding on to something that was never built to last. When someone's presence threatens your peace more than their absence does, God will let them fall away. There's a blessing buried deep in the betrayal. It's hard to see at first because all you can feel is the sting, but behind that sting is your release. Behind the tears is your awakening. The weight you carried wasn't yours. The burden you held up wasn't meant to last. And when God lets it collapse, it's not because you failed. It's because He's finally freeing you from what was slowly killing your joy. Let it fall, let it hurt. But don't let it define you. That moment of breaking is where the light gets in. You didn't lose everything. You lost what was never truly yours. You didn't lose real love. You lost the performance of it. You didn't lose stability. You lost the illusion of it. And that realization might shake you, but it won't destroy you. It will rebuild you. It will restore the parts of you that became silent, small, and scared. That's what betrayal does when you let God use it. It transforms you. It opens your eyes and strengthens your spirit. And most importantly, it reminds you of who you were before the confusion began. Don't let the pain harden you. Let it teach you. Let it raise your standards. Let it sharpen your intuition. Let it remind you that your heart is not a weakness. It's a gift. But gifts deserve to be received with care, not taken for granted. And from this moment forward, you will never again apologize for protecting your peace. You will never again explain your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You will no longer carry what God has already called you to release, because what broke you was only meant to build you. And now that it's done its job, you rise from it, wiser, stronger, and finally free. You didn't lose them. You lost the lie. The version of them you were loyal to never really existed. It was built in your mind, shaped by your hope, painted with your love. You held on to potential, not patterns. You saw what they could be, not what they consistently showed you. And that's where the disconnect began. You weren't blind. You were faithful. You weren't weak. You were willing. Willing to see the best. Willing to fight for something real. But you can't build truth on a foundation of fiction. And now that it's fallen, you can finally see what was holding you back all along. The illusion was never your fault. You loved with depth. You showed up with honesty. You gave what you hoped to receive. That's not something to regret. That's something to protect. But when God removes what isn't real, it's not rejection. It's rescue. It's redirection. It's divine love disguised as loss. Because He knew what you didn't. He saw what you couldn't. And while you were praying for peace, He was preparing to remove the source of your unrest. It hurts when what you thought was solid turns out to be hollow. It shakes your confidence. It makes you question your judgment. But don't confuse awakening with failure. You didn't fail. You just outgrew the illusion. You finally stopped shrinking yourself to fit a space that was never designed for your full self. And now, you don't need to keep editing your emotions to make someone else comfortable. You don't need to keep performing strength just to survive inconsistency. You're allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that tolerated what you now know wasn't love. You're not grieving a person. You're grieving the image you built around them. You're letting go of the dream, not the reality. Because reality was already showing you the truth. You just loved too hard to see it clearly. But that love isn't wasted. It refined you. It stretched you. It taught you what not to ignore. And now, that same love belongs to someone who won't make you beg for clarity. Someone who won't confuse your loyalty with leverage. The moment you stop chasing what left, space opens for what's meant. And in that space, something beautiful begins. A quiet strength, a deeper peace, a version of you that's no longer desperate to be seen by people who only saw what they could take. You start to see yourself again, not through their lens, but through truth, through God's eyes, through healing. You begin to realize that your value was never in their approval. Your worth was never tied to their presence. So take the lie and bury it. Mourn it if you have to, but don't return to it. You're not bound to what broke you. You're called to what builds you. And now that the false is gone, the real can begin. This is not the end. It's your rebirth. And this time, nothing fake gets to follow you. When everything goes quiet, that's when the truth speaks the loudest. The noise fades, the distractions fall away. The people you once poured into stop calling, stop checking, stop pretending. And it stings. At first, the silence feels like punishment, like you were left behind, forgotten, abandoned. But look deeper. That silence isn't abandonment. It's alignment. It's peace returning after the storm. It's the sound of your soul exhaling, finally free from all the emotional noise you mistook for connection. Because what you thought was presence was really pretense. What felt like love was often control. And now, in the quiet, you finally hear what your heart has been trying to say all along. There's a reason silence follows revelation. It's not just the absence of their voice, it's the beginning of your own. For too long, your thoughts were drowned out by their manipulation, their moods, their shifting energy. You were constantly adjusting, guessing, shrinking. But now the stillness creates space. Space for clarity, space for healing, space for you. The kind of space where God speaks, not in chaos, not in confusion, but in calm. You prayed for a sign, and silence was the answer. Not because he ignored you, but because he needed your full attention. Healing begins when you stop filling the silence with old noise, when you stop chasing conversations that always left you empty, when you stop trying to explain yourself to people who never had the capacity to understand you. Not everyone deserves access to your voice. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your process. Some people were only meant to be in your life long enough to reveal what you no longer need. And once the lesson is learned, their silence becomes a blessing in disguise. You don't have to keep the door open just because you once held it for them. You don't have to keep picking up the phone just because they used to call. It's okay to let the silence stay. It's okay to let distance protect your peace. You're not being cold, you're being clear. You're not shutting people out. You're making room for your soul to breathe. Because healing isn't loud. It's quiet, it's sacred. And it requires distance from the very noise that kept you bound. Don't rush to fill the empty space. Let it teach you. Let it ground you. Let it remind you that your value was never in how many people stayed close, but in how deeply you stayed true. Silence isn't something to fear, it's something to trust. In the quiet, your heart finds rhythm again. In the stillness, your mind clears. In the solitude, you rediscover yourself. Not the version they wanted, but the one God always intended. Let the silence stay long enough to heal what noise never could. Let it build you. Let it teach you to hear your own voice again. Because the moment you find peace in the quiet, you'll never again tolerate chaos just to feel connected. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 96A5A906B063890 IAD. Once you see the truth, you can't unsettles the same way again. That clarity you begged for, the understanding you prayed would come, it's here now. It might have arrived in silence, in heartbreak, in the slow unraveling of something you once held sacred. But now that it's here, it's a gift. Painful, yes, but powerful. Because clarity is the beginning of power. It doesn't just open your eyes, it shifts your direction. It realigns your purpose. It pulls you away from confusion and sets your feet on solid ground. For the first time in a long time, you're no longer guessing. You're no longer walking in circles around people who never intended to meet you in the middle. This is what it feels like to wake up, not with ease but with fire. The truth burns away everything that kept you blind. Every excuse you made, every second chance you gave, every time you softened the blow just to protect someone who would never do the same for you. That ends now. Because when you see clearly, you stop settling, you stop explaining. You stop shrinking your spirit to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You weren't created to be dimmed. You weren't designed to beg for love in places that only ever offered conditions. Clarity reminds you of your value. It calls you back to your core. It reminds you that you were never too much. You were just around people who were too little to hold you. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for the bare minimum from people who benefited from your self-doubt. But that story is over. The illusion has cracked, and from the pieces, something stronger is forming. A you that no longer needs outside validation to feel worthy. A you that doesn't bend just to avoid being left. A you that knows peace is better than attention, and truth is better than comfort. You don't owe explanations to anyone who made you question your reality. You don't need closure from people who closed their hearts to you long before they ever walked away. What you need is alignment, with truth, with peace, with purpose. And now that you have it, protect it with everything in you. No more convincing people of your worth. No more waiting for apologies that won't come. No more clinging to what your spirit already outgrew. This is your reset. This is your turning point. You're not who you were before you saw the truth. You've been changed, not by the betrayal, but by the clarity that followed it. You're awake now, and from here, everything changes, because once your eyes have opened, your standards rise, your energy shifts, your boundaries sharpen, and the version of you that allowed confusion to stay, that version no longer exists. You're stepping into truth now, and you'll never settle for less than real again. God will never keep you in a place that poisons your peace. Even when your heart wants to stay, even when your loyalty tries to justify the pain, He will begin to shift things. Slowly at first, discomfort rising, misalignment becoming obvious, trust unraveling thread by thread. Then suddenly, everything you were trying to hold together starts falling apart. Not because you're being punished, but because God refuses to let you build your life on something that was never meant to last. He saw what you overlooked. He heard the conversations you didn't. He felt the weight on your chest even when you smiled through it, and out of love, He began the process of pulling you out. You prayed for growth, and growth requires release. You asked for peace, and peace requires separation. You wanted purpose, and purpose cannot coexist with deception. God doesn't remove people to break you. He removes them because they were breaking you, because they were attached to a version of you that couldn't go where He's taking you. And as long as you stayed in that space, surrounded by that energy, tied to that confusion, you couldn't see clearly, you couldn't breathe fully, you couldn't rise freely. So He allowed it to unravel, not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. There comes a point when your spirit starts rejecting what your flesh still wants. You'll feel the tension, you'll sense the misalignment. That's not weakness, it's discernment. It's your soul trying to protect your future from your past. It's God whispering, "This is not it." You can fight it, you can delay it, but eventually the discomfort will grow louder than your desire to stay. And when you finally let go, you'll see that what felt like loss was actually the beginning of your liberation. You are not being left behind. You are being lifted. Every door that closed was protecting you from something you didn't see yet. Every silence was a shield. Every shift was an answered prayer in disguise. It's easy to forget that God sees the whole picture. You were only looking at the moment. He was looking at your destiny. And to get you there, He had to disconnect you from anything not built in truth. He had to make room. Because where He's taking you, you need clarity. You need strength. You need space. Stop grieving what God removed. Stop holding funerals for connections He never blessed. Let go of the version of your life that was built on trying to make others comfortable while you quietly suffered. You weren't created to live small. You weren't called to be tolerated. You were chosen to rise. And now, nothing fake can follow you. Nothing broken can bind you. Nothing untrue can stay. This is your release, your healing, your elevation, and it begins the moment you stop asking God to fix what He already freed you from. Some connections are not meant to last, they are meant to teach. The pain wasn't pointless. The confusion had a purpose. The betrayal, as brutal as it was, became the lesson that opened your eyes to what love is not. You didn't fail by trusting. You didn't lose by giving. You learned. You evolved. And even if you feel like you gave the best parts of yourself to the wrong person, those parts are not wasted. They've returned to you, refined, stronger, wiser, clearer. You don't come out of this smaller. You come out of this transformed. The very thing that hurt you became your greatest teacher. It taught you to stop begging for honesty. It taught you to stop explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. It taught you that the most dangerous thing you can do is continue watering a garden that was never yours to tend. You cannot heal in the same place that broke you. You cannot find peace in chaos, and you cannot grow in soil that refuses to nourish your roots. The moment you accepted this was the moment you took your power back, quietly, boldly, without apology. Now you see things for what they are, not what you hoped they would be. The fog is gone, the illusion shattered, and in the wreckage there is a rare kind of clarity, the kind that can't be taught by comfort, only by confrontation, only by loss, only by looking at what you allowed and finally deciding that you deserve more. You do. You deserve peace that doesn't require pretending, love that doesn't come with conditions, friendship that doesn't drain you, and a life that doesn't ask you to trade your truth for temporary belonging. Don't regret what woke you up. Don't resent the time it took. Every moment shaped you. Every scar speaks now, not as a mark of what broke you, but as proof that you healed, that you walked through the fire and didn't become ash. You became flame. You are no longer just surviving. You are seeing, choosing, moving with intention, protecting your spirit the way you once protected people who never returned the favor. That's not bitterness, that's growth. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has learned to trust themselves again. You don't need permission. You don't need closure. You need truth, and you have it now. You know what real looks like. You know what fake feels like. You know the cost of staying silent just to keep something broken intact. And you will never pay that price again. This time, your love will be guarded by wisdom. Your boundaries will not bend for temporary validation. Your peace will be the standard, and your past will be your teacher, not your prison. You're no longer asking why it happened. You're standing in the strength of knowing that it did, and that it was the beginning of everything you were always meant to become. Rejection is not always the enemy. It's often divine protection in disguise. You thought you were being pushed out, but you were being pulled up. What felt like abandonment was actually alignment. The door didn't close to punish you. It closed to preserve you. You were praying for peace, for healing, for growth, but didn't realize that some of the very people you were trying to keep were blocking the very things you asked for. God heard you before you knew how to let go, and when you couldn't walk away on your own, He allowed circumstances to make staying unbearable. You didn't lose favor. You found freedom. The space that rejection created was not empty. It was sacred. It was the space where you stopped performing, stopped chasing, stopped hoping someone would finally see your worth. You don't have to convince the right people to choose you. You don't have to beg for a seat at a table you were never meant to sit at. What rejected you was not meant to carry your future. What walked away was not equipped to hold your calling. The love that left could not nurture what you're becoming. You are not being punished for trusting. You are being positioned for purpose. You are being separated so you can be elevated. Some things cannot go with you. Some people cannot follow you. Not because you're better, but because where you're going requires clarity, strength, and alignment that not everyone is willing to walk in. You were willing to grow, to heal, to face yourself. But they weren't, and that's not your fault. You're not responsible for someone else's refusal to rise. Stop mourning the doors that were never meant to stay open. Stop questioning the worth that rejection tried to shake. It didn't take anything from you. It revealed what could no longer stay. And now you're lighter. Now you're free to move, free to breathe, free to become. What was taken was never the blessing. The blessing is what's coming because of the space that was made. Rejection doesn't shrink your value. It redirects your vision. There's a new strength growing in you now, one that doesn't need validation to stand tall, one that doesn't need to be chosen to feel whole, one that knows rejection is not the end of the road. It's often the start of the right one. You are not less because they walked away. You are more because you survived it, because you found yourself in the wreckage, because you stood back up with a new fire in your eyes and a quiet knowing in your chest that nothing real will ever require you to lose yourself. This is the moment where you stop asking why and start trusting what's next. You don't need to reopen doors that God has already sealed shut. You need only to walk forward, knowing that what felt like rejection was actually a redirection into everything your soul has been waiting for. Growth doesn't always come wrapped in comfort. Sometimes it arrives as silence, distance, or betrayal. Not to harm you, but to strip away everything that is not rooted in truth. When you asked to become stronger, you weren't given power. You were given situations that demanded it. When you prayed for clarity, you weren't handed answers. You were handed confusion that forced you to look deeper. The things you thought were setbacks were actually setups for a deeper version of yourself to emerge. Not the version that seeks approval, but the one that walks in alignment. Not the version that clings to the past, but the one ready to step into purpose. You are no longer trying to be understood by people who lack the capacity to understand themselves. You are no longer overextending for relationships that ask you to dim your light just to keep peace. You are finally realizing that peace that costs your authenticity is not peace at all. It's self-abandonment. And you've done enough of that. You've silenced your voice long enough. You've played small to make others comfortable long enough. Now, it's time to reclaim the parts of you that you gave away too easily. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe your loyalty to places that drain you. Real love doesn't demand your suffering. Real connection doesn't require your confusion. You've spent too much time trying to explain your heart to those who were never listening. But now, you're learning that the right people will feel your presence without you needing to perform. The right environment will recognize your light without you having to set yourself on fire to be seen. What left didn't break you. It revealed the cracks so you could rebuild stronger. What failed didn't define you. It redirected you to something more aligned. You are not who you used to be, and that's your power. The pain matured you. The silence taught you. The loneliness shaped you. And through it all, you didn't give up on yourself. Even when you were tired. Even when no one clapped. Even when it looked like everything was falling apart. Deep down, you knew something greater was forming. Something that couldn't be rushed. Something that needed the breaking. You are standing in the evidence of that transformation now. Wiser, sharper, clearer, and most importantly, no longer willing to settle for anything less than what your soul truly needs. You don't just want connection, you want truth. You don't just want attention, you want alignment. You don't just want noise, you want meaning. And because of that, you're no longer scared of walking alone. Because you finally understand, solitude isn't empty when you're full of self-respect. Distance isn't cold when it protects your peace. And endings aren't sad when they lead to beginnings rooted in truth. This is not your downfall, it's your unfolding. And nothing that's truly meant for you will ever make you question your worth. You no longer have to shrink to fit into spaces that were never built for your expansion. You no longer have to apologize for being too much, too honest, too passionate, or too aware. The very things that others tried to diminish in you were the things that made you powerful. You were never too much, they were just too small to hold it. They couldn't understand your depth because they were never willing to meet themselves in theirs. And now, you're done waiting for validation from people who fear your growth. Your light threatens the ones still hiding in the shadows of their own denial. But that's not your burden to carry. You are not responsible for making others comfortable with your evolution. You were not created to remain silent just to be accepted. You were made to rise, to speak, to become. And every time you chose yourself in a room where you were expected to break, you broke the cycle. Every time you said no when your voice used to tremble, you rebuilt your strength. You stopped waiting for someone to save you, and instead, you became the one who wouldn't let yourself drown. There's a quiet power that comes from surviving what was meant to destroy you. A confidence that doesn't scream, it just moves different. When you've walked through fire and didn't burn, you stop fearing heat. You stop chasing people who only loved the version of you they could control. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. And most of all, you stop asking for clarity from people who created your confusion. You are not bitter. You are awake. You are not guarded. You are selective. And that's a sign of healing. Healing is not about pretending nothing happened. It's about facing what did and choosing to grow from it anyway. It's choosing to protect your energy, your time, and your heart without apology. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The kind of wisdom that knows who you are now was built from every painful truth you refused to ignore. This is your becoming. Not because they saw your worth, but because you did. Not because they stayed, but because you finally stopped needing them to. You've stopped reaching for the hands that let go. You've stopped watering gardens that never intended to bloom. You've redirected that energy inward, and now everything they tried to break in you is rising stronger than ever, not because you fought harder, but because you finally surrendered the fight for people who were never fighting for you. You didn't lose them. You found you. You didn't fall apart. You fell into alignment. The lies they used to hide behind can't reach you here. The masks they wore are cracking, and the truth they once buried is rising to the surface. Because when God removes someone, He always reveals something, and what He's revealing now is not their rejection, it's your resurrection. Keep walking. You're not done. You're just beginning. There's something sacred about walking away without bitterness, about healing without needing closure. When you choose peace over proving your point, you reclaim a power that can't be taken. You stop trying to be understood by people who never intended to listen. You stop pouring your heart into places that only ever saw you as useful, not valuable. And in that moment of silence, you hear the truth loud and clear. Your worth was never tied to their ability to see it. Their blindness was not your burden. Their rejection was not your reflection. It was redirection. A divine shift disguised as disappointment. You no longer have to question what went wrong. The truth is, it had nothing to do with your goodness and everything to do with their intentions. People can wear masks for years, pretending loyalty, feigning love, acting present. But when truth shows up, when light touches darkness, facades collapse. They couldn't fake it forever. Eventually, they had to reveal themselves, and as painful as that unveiling was, it was necessary. It was God's protection disguised as betrayal. Because if he hadn't let you see how fake they were, you might have kept trusting the performance. You might have kept giving your soul to an illusion. Now you see it clearly. The way they twisted your kindness into weakness. The way they praised you in public and diminished you in private. The way they disappeared the moment you needed them most. That's not real love. That's not real friendship. Real doesn't vanish in difficulty. Real doesn't gossip behind closed doors. Real doesn't manipulate shame or control. You didn't lose something genuine. You lost a lie. And though it hurts, it's also freeing. Because now, you're no longer bound by the illusion of what you hoped it was. You're finally standing in the truth of what it actually was. And this truth, it's what sets you free, not just from them, but from the part of you that thought you had to earn love, prove worth, chase loyalty. You've outgrown the space where pretending felt necessary. You've stepped into a season where honesty is non-negotiable, where energy speaks louder than words, where actions matter more than apologies. And now, you trust patterns, not promises. You listen with your spirit, not just your ears. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity, and it's beautiful, because now you choose you. You protect your peace without guilt. You no longer keep doors open for people who only ever plan to walk out. You've turned the pain into power, the loss into lesson, the heartbreak into healing. You've stopped explaining your standards. You've stopped compromising your value. And you've stopped shrinking so others could feel tall. That version of you, the one who tolerated dishonesty, disrespect, and disloyalty, is gone, buried beneath the ashes of what had to end. And in its place, someone stronger has risen, not colder, wiser, not harder, clearer, not ruthless, rooted in self-worth, rooted in truth, rooted in the quiet knowing God let you see how fake they were, so you'd never settle for fake again. You're not here to prove your worth to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. You're not here to convince anyone to stay who only shows up when it's convenient. You've done enough explaining, enough justifying, enough sacrificing parts of yourself just to make others feel more comfortable.